Hello everyone and welcome to the City Hub.
She's Christina.
And he's Makia.
And today we are honored to be joined by Sir Ken Olisa.
Welcome to Nottingham. So first question is, what does a Lord Lieutenant do?
I am the monarch's representative. There's one of us for every county in the country. There are 98 Lord Lieutenants in the country. It's a relatively recent position in this great nation. It was King Henry VIII in the 16th century who introduced the concept of Lord Lieutenants. I say that slightly tongue-in-cheek, but the High Sheriff, which is a similar role, goes back 1,000 years, and so we are relatively recent. All that time ago, it was a little bit like the military governor for a county. So the job of the Lord Lieutenant was to quell riots if that happened and to raise the army if the king decided to go to war. What I now do is whatever the monarch would like me to do, which binds our communities together in a better way. So the king is very concerned about, for example, multi-faith relationships, people from different faiths coming together, living together, being in harmony. And so part of my job is to try to find ways in London to do precisely that. I have a colleague here in Nottinghamshire, who is a Lord Lieutenant of Nottinghamshire, etc., in the other counties. And we all do the same thing, although obviously in different ways.
Okay, so you are born, bred and educated in Nottingham. So how did you get from there to where you are today?
So I was born in Hyson Green. Actually, I was born in City Hospital, grew up in Hyson Green, went to school here. I went to junior school, infant school, junior school, and then I went to High Pavement Grammar School. This is my old High Pavement tie. The honest answer is I did a couple of things. First thing is I studied quite hard, very hard at school, and it's too easy to dismiss the power of education in life generally, but actually I can't overstate how important education is. I'm still learning at my now very great age, but I did work hard at school. Very important, mainly because I was terrified of my mother who didn't give me any support if I didn't work hard, so I worked hard. First thing. Second thing, I've been lucky with employment. My first job was to work with a big computer company called IBM. My second job was to work with another big computer company, now moved on, called Wang Laboratories. But I had good jobs where I was able to use my things I'd learned at school and at university and apply them well. And then thirdly, and probably most importantly of those three, I've been amazingly lucky. People have gone out of their way to help me. I've had managers who've gone out of their way to help me. I've had strangers go out of their way to help me. And I can attribute much of my success to not ignoring advice, help, assistance when it's been offered to me. And I see a lot of people don't do that. They suspect why someone is trying to help them and ignore them. Bad plan. Take it all whenever you can. So I would say education, absolutely, employment, and then a lot of good luck. Oh, and probably some talent as well.
You've been a keen proponent of social mobility, chairing the Olisa Foundation, which has had its heart increase in life chances of those African or Caribbean heritage. Apart from sharing your own journey to success, how do you feel about that?
The Olisa Foundation is focused on helping people from what I call tough reality backgrounds.
Yeah.
So like my own single-parent family, small house, rental accommodation, no money, and despite that you can get on. People from all walks of life have tough reality backgrounds. I have to say, having a refugee from Ukraine sitting opposite me, that's a pretty tough reality background. So tough reality is the point, but the system of society is such that people who've got essentially a handicap, because tough reality slows you down, find it very hard to get into leadership positions because they just don't have the experience, they don't have the confidence, etc., that comes if you don't have those kinds of backgrounds. And the Olisa Foundation is focused entirely on finding future leaders from tough reality backgrounds and giving them the support, the alumni network, the social capital to be able to compete with people who've had privileged backgrounds. And I think if the nation and the world would be a better place if we had a diversity of people leading it, not everybody who had a paid for education and a privileged background and then go off and do something, because they've got no understanding of what it's like to, for example, have no money. And I'll give you an example of that. I visited, in my capacity as Lord Lieutenant, a food bank. It doesn't really matter what it was in the east of London. And it was a lovely visit. Everyone is very excited that the Lord Lieutenant is there. There were tables laid and groaning with food for the customers. And at 11 o'clock, we'd done all the selfies and all the rest of it. The door opened and it was unlocked. And in came the first customer. And he had he had a bag, he had his eyes down, he just went and he took things and put them in the bag and left. And I had a flashback to my school days, because when I was at school, I had free school meals, free school dinners. And my dinner ticket looked like everybody else's dinner ticket, but it had a big black cross on it, which said poor boy. And I found it so humiliating. I hardly ever had lunch when I was at school. And that man's eyes, it just reminded me of that moment when you suddenly realize your ticket says poor. I'm pleased to say that having seen that, and because of my experience, I talked to the food bank people and they've come up with a plan, a solution. And their solution is really simple. You're no longer given free food, you pay to belong to a club. You don't pay very much, but you pay to belong to a club, which gives you a right to the things that are there, as opposed to someone bountifully giving you something. And that simple change has changed the whole persona of that food bank and now many others. I tell that story because if I hadn't had that background, I've just seen a man who was slightly rude with eye contact, no eye contact, but I recognised it. So I say that because I think it's so important that social mobility should be giving people the opportunity to fulfil their potential and not be held down by other people who have got the privilege of the positions that they're in.
Okay, but reflecting to your journey, what advice would you offer to the young people of color who may be facing the challenges or any discrimination in their, for example, personal or professional pursuits?
I would say suck it up and get on. I think it's a real problem. I was interviewed at a different context. Actually, it was for an honorary degree at another university. And I was asked, how important being of colour was to me. And I was really cross. I mean, this is a really big deal. What was happening was exciting. What a question. And I said, it's my 40th adjective. Anyway, the chap who was introducing me said, and Mr. Olisa is very pleased to be here today. He's done this, this, and this. And he points out that the colour of his skin is his 40th adjective. It's a fact. But, I've got disabled friends and they don't want to be described or defined by their disability. It's just the wrong way to go about it. It's a control mechanism that people like to use to make people feel somehow slightly less adequate. And it's clearly not held me back. And if it has, I've missed every one of the cues when people have tried to use the colour of my skin to make a difference. So my answer is it's the 40th adjective. And my advice is don't let it define you. You can't change it. Focus on the things you can change.
You have an interesting family motto. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, my mother, single parent, my mother had a very simple view, which is you should do your best at everything you tried to do. If you weren't any good at it, so she got a piano and I tried to learn the piano, bad idea. Tried sport, bad idea. So I had to try. What I was never allowed to do was not to try. This has lived with me all through my life, and so doing well at the things that I can is a very important part of my life. However, as you've already asked me about the social mobility point and so on, I think it's also really important for people who've been as lucky as I have been to give back to others. I think I have a sacred responsibility to share as much of my luck as I can with other people. So my motto is do well, do good. Do your best that you possibly can, but don't think that it was your right to be that position. You're privileged to have it, and you should share it with other people. Do good.
Okay, so you have a close relationship with the royals, especially the monarch. So what are they like in real life?
That's a really good question. It's a really profound question, I think. If you started out to design a country, would you start out with an hereditary monarchy? What logic can there possibly be that the person who's your head of state is there because their parent was the head of state? To which the answer, first of all, is if we didn't want the monarchy in the country, we would get rid of it. In fact, we tried that in the 17th century with King Charles I, and we went back to having a monarchy because the alternative, which was an elected politician, wasn't deemed in the 17th century to be attractive. But as I've heard members of the royal family say, if the country doesn't want us, then we wouldn't exist. So it's not anti-democratic to have a monarchy, which is a very important myth to bust. The second thing about it is, what does a head of state do? Well, they represent the values of the whole nation. So it's quite hard if you're a politician, because by definition you've grown up holding a set of values which are in opposition to the other sets of values, whereas a monarchy is able to represent the values of everybody. What I see them doing is precisely that. I see day in and day out members of the royal family sprinkling a small amount of pixie dust wherever they go and getting people to look at each other in a different light. So what does that mean? For example, if you heard the King's speech at Christmas, the Christmas message, it was all about multi-faith, interfaith relationships, working together about core values. Well, who else can say that in the country. Very hard, because if you are, say, the Archbishop of Canterbury or the Chief Rabbi or one of the more senior members of the Muslim faith, your people who are following you will have questions about what that means. Head of state, though, can say, I'm talking about everybody. And it's that bringing everybody together that is so powerful. Last week I was at an event where the Princess Royal was the guest of honour. It was an event for, it was an award ceremony from a city organisation called FIR, and they were handing out awards to banks and financial institutions. And then there was a race to donate money to save the children. Princess Anne gave a brilliant speech about save the children, what was happening to children in the world, the Gaza, et cetera, all those things that happen in Ukraine and so on. And they raised just over £1 million in 8 minutes at this event. £1 million in 8 minutes. If she hadn't been there and hadn't given that speech, they wouldn't have raised anything like that amount of money. So it's that doing good, bringing people together, making people feel proud of themselves and what we can do is the job of the head of state. There are other things they do as well, obviously, signing off laws and so on, but in the world that I operate, that's what they do, and I'm a mini version of that to try to make that work across Greater London, and my colleagues in the rest of the country do the same thing in the other counties.
What were your memories of Nottingham, and how has it changed since your childhood?
My memory, well, it's very hard, talking to the audience today, it's very hard for you to even begin to imagine what life was like in the 1950s. So I was born in 1951. The Second World War had ended 6 years before. So life then, in those early days, was poor in Nottingham. My favourite place to play was a bomb site just over Radford Road, where houses had been bombed and then been pulled down. It was so interesting because you could play in cellars and bits of house and so on. Obviously, it's not, thankfully, not like that anymore. Nottingham has always been a thriving commercial city, and that's still the case. And as I travelled around yesterday, Nottingham, it's all very similar in that sense of buzz about the place. But I stayed in a hotel opposite what used to be the courthouse on High Pavement, ironically. And when I was growing up, this was the lace market. These were all factories where people were making things. There's a lot less of that happening. So I think we've seen an evolution in Nottingham over time, but it's still very much Nottingham.
What legacy do you hope to leave, both professionally and personally?
My wife and I gave a rather large amount of money, in fact, stupidly most of our money, which is why I'm still working in my late age, to my alma mater, my college in Cambridge. Back to my point about education, I had the best possible privileged education when I was at Cambridge. I learned so much, not just about academic subjects, but about life generally. And my wife and I endowed the library. My college didn't have a particularly good library. It now has a stonkingly brilliant library called the Olisa Library. And I'm rather pleased that that is going to be my legacy, because libraries in Cambridge tend to be there for 300-400 years. So I think that will see me out. In terms of personally, so professionally, then I think probably the Alito Foundation. I'd like to think that before I pass off this mortal coil, that there will be people who've graduated through the Alito program who are now running industry or running professional services or in senior political positions, who've come from the kinds of backgrounds that I have and have recognised that instead of getting angry and resentful about things, they've changed them for the better.
Last question. You're clearly a very busy man, but when you get a little bit of spare time, what do you like to do?
Well, I have two daughters, and they have produced 6 grandchildren, and I like to play with my grandchildren. I like to beat them at chess. That's not getting very good these days, but I used to love beating them at chess. I now put up with being beaten by them at chess, but I enjoy that. We have a cottage by a little stream in Dorset where I try to escape as often as I can. And as Lord Lieutenant, of course, I spend my time rushing around, enjoying the privilege of that role, and feeling rather pleased with myself. And then remembering that I have a sacred responsibility to give back.
Yeah, of course.
Well, thank you for joining us today at City Hub.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the conversation with us.
And a huge thank you to Sir Ken for being here with us today.
Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you both. Thank you. Thank you.